I just saw
No
this
worries.
one.
No,
Yeah.
no
How
problem.
are you?
Fine, fine, and you? How are you?
Yeah, all good.
So, very good. So, this is my partner from the thesis, is Vicente.
Hi.
Hey.
He will be in the interview as well. So, let's get started, if you will. We're recording the screen, so if when you answer, can you look at the camera, please?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So, to start, could you briefly introduce yourself and tell us about your current role and at Wildlife Studios and the responsibilities it involves?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Giovanni Piffer. Um, I work with business development for a few years now, and I have been working at Wildlife Studios for 3.5 years. I'm a business development manager, and I take care of specifically the partnerships that the company has with many different companies, many different partners, but mostly partnerships related to content and promotion of brands and intellectual properties in the game, in our games. Wildlife Studios is a mobile gaming studio and publisher. So we publish our own games. We are a Brazilian company that is, I think, 14 years old. Um, and I work with all of our games, but most of my time I spent with Tennis Clash, which is a sports game. It's the biggest tennis game in the world.
Yeah. So, Wildlife publishes in more than 100 countries. So, what technical or content adaptations do you make for markets such as Latin America and compared with the US or Asia?
Um, we publish for mobile. So, generally speaking, on the technical side, I don't think we do many optimizations or adjustments based on the region of our users. What tends to change is mostly in the live ops side of things, so the kinds of events that we create. So we always want to have events that are relevant for different parts of the world. So we will have events that are more appealing to North America, others that are more appealing to Europe, and some that are more appealing to Latin America. Um, and what I mean by that are just like seasonal events, maybe something that could go in the game for a month or for a week or a few days that could be related to a holiday or to something local that happens in specific countries. So that is the biggest adaptation that we do. And we sometimes also play around and do some tests around pricing. So generally speaking, our pricing is global. So anything that you buy in Tennis Clash, you would, for example, in Tennis Clash, and this applies for all our games, you would spend the same amount of money regardless of you're buying in Brazil or in the United States. But sometimes we do tests, and so we try to adapt the prices of content to the purchasing power of different countries. And sometimes this is good for monetization strategies.
Okay, so what player wellness metrics do you track and how do you respond when you detect problematic patterns? For example, excessive session length or impulsive purchases?
Yeah, so we track a bunch of things. I wouldn't be able to mention. I don't even know all the details of everything that we track, but some big metrics, the most relevant ones that we track are, for example, um, returning rates. So we track returning rates day one, day three, day five, day seven, and they keep going as the player progresses. So we understand how many players are returning to the game after the first day they have installed. We also tracked um, average session time and total time played. So total time played would be like the accumulated total time that a player spends throughout the day. It could be through many different sessions. And then I think these are like very generic metrics that we track for all of our games. And then each game has specific metrics, for example, number of matches or number of kills that you have or like amount of experience points that you acquire. So then these are all engagement metrics that would vary on a game basis. And we also track sentiment in our communities. So now with large language models, it's a lot easier to track those kinds of things in our communities. So we usually run some analysis to understand what our communities are talking about the game in different social media, and then run sentiment analysis to see like if the general perception is being more positive as time goes by, or if there are any negative trends that we can um, see. And then we are able to dig deeper and like talk to the community, sometimes run surveys to understand what is wrong and what is right, and try to make adaptations based on that. and, and another thing that we do a lot that is very relevant for the industry is A/B testing most of the things that we do. So what I mean with that is whenever we are analyzing a specific metric, let's say we're analyzing the time played or the returning rates, and we have one idea to make that better based on input from the community or based in some idea that came from the team. We always work on that feature on the product on the engineering side, and we bring that to the game in an A/B test, which means that we're going to have a cohort of players in the new configuration and a cohort of players in the old configuration. And we're going to randomly place them in those two buckets. And then we're going to compare the results um, between those two cohorts of players. And then we're able to learn after some time, sometimes a few days, sometimes many days, depending on what you're testing. You are able to compare both and understand how the change that you made is impacting that specific metric that is interesting to you. So that is something that is really important for us to keep the products going and getting better over time.
Yeah. So the next question is, what criteria guide do you? Sorry, what criteria guide you do when emblading ads in a game so they don't disrupt the player's flow experience?
Yeah, we in our games in particular, we usually don't run any ads that disrupt the experience of the player while the player is actually playing the game. I would say that 90% of our ads are what we call rewarded ads. This means that players click on it and they want to watch it in order to get a reward. So this is usually very positive for the players. But one strategy that we use in some of our games is what we call in-game ads, which are ads that appear during the gameplay but without disrupting the gameplay. So one example is in Tennis Clash, it's a tennis game, right? So you are seeing the other character playing against you, and you can see the surroundings, right? The court. We could place a banner on that court that's showing a specific ad, and this doesn't impact your experience at all. But this is one way that we can showcase a brand and make revenue. So yeah, these are the ways that we usually take care of that.
Yeah, that's a good manner. I so how do you leverage with the concept of gamification and its principles, such as variable rewards, level progression, to keep players motivated without resorting to manipulative practices?
Yeah, well, we use those kinds of things in all of our games, like having, for example, daily rewards for logging in. So you just log into the game and you can get something for free, and then if you log in every day, you get increasingly better rewards. That's a very easy way to gamify just the opening the game and creating a habit on players. But yeah, we use those concepts in pretty much, let's say, most features that we create, like trying to create habits on players.
Yeah. So, from an engineering standpoint, how do you decide when to introduce competitive elements or into a game that starts as purely casual?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um, I think that we usually go to like competitive elements when we want to add a social element to the game, because for most players having a social element is important, and there are different ways for you to do socialization in games, right? One of those ways is through competition, through like simple things like leaderboards and just you knowing that you are playing against other friends and you are placing above or below them in a global ranking or in a local ranking, depending on what you want. But the moment when we make that decision varies a lot. And the way that we approach development is that we usually develop the core. So the core, for example, could be more casual, like you said. And then after we have a core that works, that keeps players coming back every day and keeps them engaged, we start putting monetization elements, because obviously in the end of the day our goal is to monetize, is to make money as a business. And as part of the monetization strategies, sometimes adding competitive features is important. So I'd say that this is a common moment, but it's not a rule. Like it really depends on the project.
Okay. So, how do you balance when designing daily rewards and battle passes the goal of player retention with the risk of fostering compulsive use?
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
How do you balance when designing daily rewards and battle passes the goal of player retention with the risk of fostering compulsive use? I guess.
Okay. Um, I would say that the kinds of daily rewards that we do and battle passes don't get anywhere close to like compulsiveness. Um, they are not the core of our games. They are usually one way to help players remember about the game and maybe see like a push notification and open the game again. But they are not the core. You don't do that very often. You don't do that many times per session or per day. It's usually something that you do only once, and then upon opening the game, you go and engage with the core, which could be like playing a tennis match or playing like a battle. Um, so I would say we don't think about that as much. Like we don't worry specifically about the compulsiveness in that sense.
Okay, and how do you ensure that loot boxes mechanics comply with the current digital gambling regulations?
Um, we we basically use the same standards as the whole industry. That's the easiest way to do it. Like our games are not anywhere near like gambling. We don't even have like social casino titles and games like that, which are usually more concerning and more challenging for you to stay away from gambling. So the types of loot boxes and gachas that we have in our games are quite far from what you would see in gambling. And like in order to protect players in a more clear way, what we have is that all loot boxes usually have a good level of information about what you're gonna have inside it. There's still a gacha element that's important for the mechanics of the distribution, but players have a good idea of what will be in there. The categories of items, the quantities of items. They know all of that in advance. Then the only thing that they find out when the gacha rolls is the specific items within those categories that they will end up getting.
Oh, okay. So, what role does accessibility play in your future roadmap?
Uh, for a mobile game, for like we are 100% focused on mobile. So accessibility is usually something that is easier for us to tackle than with console games. So I don't think it's something that we have in the roadmaps of our existing products, of our existing games, like change accessibility in any way, but it's something that we have in mind whenever we're designing something new. And this goes all the way from thinking about like the audio accessibility, how essential audio is for when you're playing the game, to like color schemes and making sure that people with some sort of visual impairment would still be able to play the game as well as they can. Um, but then, like ultimately, it's a lot easier to deal with accessibility for mobile in comparison with console, and we have seen quite a few um, success stories of like people with some sort of impairment playing our games. And specifically in Tennis Clash, we have one of our competitions, one of our like live esports competitions that partners with an organization called Handy Gamers in France, which is an organization focused on gamers that have any sort of handicap. And we've had competitions in the past where players with some sort of handicap were competing against players uh, against like an open field of players, and they were playing it all at the same level, which is always great to see. So we try to have those kinds of initiatives to like they don't necessarily change the accessibility in the games, like the accessibility is already there, but they kind of foster um, more diverse people engaging with the game and showing that they're able to engage with the game at a higher level.
Giovanni, I have three questions for you. Gamification has already been discussed, but I also want to know how important is gamification in video games?
Well, I think it's it's essential, right? We use gamification as a word in other businesses and in other parts of life, but in the end of the day, the word comes from games, right? So gamification is a core part of any game, I would say. But then there are specific elements that we call gamification that we can apply to like daily rewards, daily logins, and stuff like that, which are like more related to the word gamification. But generally speaking, I mean, it's a core part of all games.
Now, speaking of visual or auditory effects, how important are these details for video games?
Well, they're really really important. I'd say in general in video games. For mobile games, they are a bit less important, as we know that a very relevant part of the user base plays games without audio on, right? So they play on mute. This doesn't mean that we don't work on audio. We work very carefully on soundtracks and um, effects. Um, and I'd say that in order to create a really a really engaging experience, it is essential for you to think of audio as relevant as the visual elements that you have. I don't think you need to have amazing audio in all parts of your game, but for the parts that are memorable, when you're unlocking a new item, when you are discovering something new, it is really crucial to have that. And we have dedicated teams here that work specifically with audio for all our games, and I'm always amazed when I can interact with them and see what they're doing for our games.
And the last one, besides gamification and audiovisual effects, what other elements are important when creating a game?
Well, um, many many different aspects I would say, but like obviously like the core gameplay that you have is the most important thing that you can have for any game. And what I mean by the core gameplay is, if it's a tennis game, is how the character is hitting the ball and how the ball is going to the other side and how much time that takes. So what are the dynamics of the actual gameplay? That is always the most crucial part for any game. And if that is really really good, then you have more than 50% of what you need. But then on top of that, you have like building blocks that will be also essential to make sure that this gameplay will be um, best used. You know, will be developed to the maximum of its capability. And these would be things like competitive features that we talked about, um, monetization features, right? So the whole meta game is really crucial. So, for example, if you have like the tennis game, how do you develop your character? You know, do you have different characters or do you have only one and then you level up? And when you level up, how does that happen? Do you have different attributes that you can um, level up specifically, or is a something that goes up all at once? Do you have different items that you can use? Do you have any sort of power ups that you can use on a for a specific game or for a specific moment? So this is what we call the meta game, right? It's not the gameplay itself, but are things that will help you, will be essential for your progress in the game, and that will impact your gameplay. So for this is so important that at Wildlife we have um, meta games that we have developed and that have worked well for one game, and now we have them as kind of platform services. You know, so when we develop a new game, so we have a really good gameplay that we think will work well for a new game, we have tested that and we like it, we can simply take one meta game that it was already developed in the past and plug that into this game. And obviously it's not as simple as that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like having a really robust meta game is super important for any mobile game. So I would highlight that as a the most essential building block, apart from the gameplay, of course.
Yeah. I have the last two questions and we're done. So, do
Okay.
you do you collaborate with a psychologist or mental health experts when designing mechanics that may affect your player well-being?
I don't think we have in the past. No, I don't think we do. I'd say that we usually work with mechanics that are like very well known, and like I said, we don't do online casino. We don't do anything that's close to like the most addictive things that you see on apps and on mobile. We stay really far from gambling and really far from social casino. So we usually work with features that we consider like quite safe from that perspective.
So, yeah. Now the last two questions. Um, Looking 5 years ahead, which emerging technologies do you think will reshape rewards loops and the overall player-game relationship? For example, AI or cloud streaming, or
You mean like which technologies will impact that?
yeah,
Yeah.
the relationship player-game, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Well, AI for sure, but that's a very broad answer at this stage, right? AI is impacting everything and it will impact the way that we develop games, but I also think it will impact the way that gamers interact with games in some ways. We are already looking at like understanding how we can develop games that have AI at its core, meaning that the AI is not just used to speed up the development process, but the AI is actually like a very relevant part of the gameplay. Or, for example, like using LLMs to create experiences where players can engage with stories or can create images, can interact with each other through images and through prompts that they are able to create in those elements, and that's part of a game, you know, kind of a social game. So we are already exploring that, and I'm sure that all companies out there are also exploring it, and I expect that in 5 years this would be something that has hit the market, and for players that would be impactful in the way that they interact with game. I expect that we could see different games maybe than we are able to imagine today.
Yeah. And the last one, so from the your perspective and your opinion, from your opinion and your perspective of a video game engineer, why do you think people play video games in general?
Oh, well, so many reasons. People play for fun, people play um, for socializing, right? I like I can say for myself, not even as a professional, but as a consumer. Today, I play mostly for socialization. I play games with my friends. Sometimes that's the moment of the week when I will spend some time chatting with them, just in the lobby while we play. And in the past, I've played games for many other reasons, for like fulfilling challenges and having that feeling that you have achieved something great that was really difficult and that you had to grind for, and also just because some sort of mechanic was interesting. But I think the most interesting reason that makes people play, in my opinion, is this like community thing, and we see that in many of our games, and that's really common in the industry. You see games where like the communities are really really strong, right? So people create basically communities around games, and then they create a lot of new relationships around those or around that game, and none of it would exist if that game didn't exist. So I think that's the most interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's it. I we have all the things we need to know, Giovanni.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I
Uh,
hope that's helpful.
Thank you for giving us some of your time for the interview.
Yeah.
Sure, sure, yeah, happy to help.
Yeah, so if we need something I can text you
Yeah, sure, sure,
and
please do.
that. So that's it. Thank you, Giovanni.
Thank you. Yeah, good luck
Okay.
with your
Very much.
thesis.